It's the first week of August 2023 and I am out at Pevensey Marshes. This low-lying area of grassland stretches for over 3,500 hectares and the bit I'm on is owned by the National Trust. While much of the Pevensey Marshes has been drained for agriculture, making it now home to sheep and cattle, it's still a thriving habitat for hundreds of other species, including birds like lapwings and redshanks. Interestingly, part of the marshes includes an area that used to be known as North Eye Island, where there used to be a medieval village called North Eye. We know that once North Eye was a little port on a winding river which led inland as far as the Sussex town of Hailsham. North Eye had its own salt works and a flint-based church dedicated to St James, but all that is long gone and it's not an island at all anymore. The village was abandoned around the year 1400 following, first, an outbreak of plague, then a colossal wave of storms which battered the Sussex coast, silting up the river, making the village more or less unlivable. Today, about 3% of England is classed as marshland, but this number used to be much, much higher. Nobody knows quite how high, but the county we're talking about today once had an additional 15,000 square miles or 40,000 square kilometres of fenland that has now been drained. According to estimates by the Environment Agency, it's believed that by the end of the century, climate change will mean there won't be any fens left in southern England at all, which is wild to think about, not least because wetlands are important to England's history. Famously, Alfred the Great hid in them when Wessex was overrun, returning later to forge the nation. And that's just one incident in a long tradition of legendary English rebels hiding in marshes to evade their enemies. With this thought in mind, come out of your hiding place in the bulrushes and gather close around the Three Ravens campfire and listen in. Welcome to the Three Ravens podcast.
There were three ravens sat on a tree, down a down, hey down a down. They were as black as they might be with a down. One of them said to his mate, "Where shall we our breakfast take? With a down, derry, 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 down, down."
Hello and welcome to episode 18 of the Three Ravens podcast. My name's Martin Vaux. I'm a writer, storyteller and English romanticism obsessive, and I'm joined, as ever, by my partner in crime and all dark arts, award-winning poet, playwright, Shakespeare scholar and witch, Eleanor Conlon.
Hello! You're smelling a little swampy today, Martin.
Well, thank you, darling. I've been out squishing and squashing through bogs, but, I promise I'll shower later.
Wonderful. For now, though, we should start by thanking our new supporters on Patreon.
Yes, thank you to our newest Patreon supporters, Sam, Phil, Amy, Elizabeth and Andrew.
All hail Phil, King of Patreon.
All hail Amy, King of Patreon.
All hail Elizabeth, King of Patreon.
All hail Andrew, King of Patreon.
All hail Sam, King of Patreon. Now, I really hope that everyone in our Patreon community has been enjoying this month's newsletter and that you'll enjoy this month's special Patreon exclusive episode, which will be released on Thursday.
Yeah.
Our very wonderful exploration of the very haunted Screaming Woods at Pluckley.
Yeah, warning in advance, it's a spooky place. We properly freaked ourselves out walking around it.
And if you'd like additional bonus content, including special episodes, our stories as text versions, all of our episodes episodes ad-free and other goodies like the newsletter, then do please sign up for $3 a month or $6 a month at patreon.com/3 Ravens podcast.
Also, we should mention that, as it's August, we now have an all-new 3 Ravens Film Club film. This month, we're encouraging everyone to watch a much more modern movie, 2022's You Won't Be Alone, which is a folk horror all about witches in 19th century Macedonia.
I'm really excited about this one. I've been wanting to see it for ages.
Yeah.
As always, please send us your own folk tales or folk-inspired bits of trivia to 3ravenspodcast@gmail.com for inclusion in our next listener episode.
Yes.
And that's the same place to also send your own original artwork for our new card design competition.
Yes, please send us your own artwork that you think will look nice on the front of a greetings card inspired by the folklore of winter. And at the end of our second series, we'll pick our favourite 3 to turn into greetings cards to sell through our online shop at 3ravenspodcast.com/shop.
Yes, we've already had some beautiful entries, so thank you for those. Very exciting.
We have, yeah.
And thank you to those people who've already ordered cards from the first contest. They're in the post.
Yes.
And I can confirm they're very beautiful.
They've
come out so nicely and we are loving those.
We are indeed. Now, we're releasing this episode on Monday, the 7th of August, which, like some Mondays, isn't a particularly noteworthy day for saints or obscure festivals.
Sometimes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Not every week can be a winner. So we've got another nothing day.
Well, I thought it might actually be a good time to talk about dog days.
Now, I'm assuming that you mean days when you just want to be covered in puppies or just take the lead out and go on long walks with your favourite pooch.
Not quite.
Or days when you want to dress up like a dog and wag your tail.
No, not that either. No, I'm talking about the strange period of celestial time we are currently in, prompted by the heliacal rising of the star system Sirius.
Oh, tell me more. Now, I was being facetious because I know that Shakespeare references dog days.
Yes.
The dog days now reign in
Yeah.
Henry VIII.
Yeah, that's right. And John Webster mentions them in The Duchess of Malfi. Charles Dickens does more than once, amongst other writers throughout history. And this is because the concept of dog days have their roots in the most ancient of texts, feeding right the way through almost every cultural tradition in existence.
Blimey, why is that?
Well, because basically Sirius is the brightest star in the night sky, and when it rises at this time of year, things get weird.
So Sirius is Canis Major, isn't it? Which is also called the dog star.
Precisely. So the ancient Greeks called it Kuon, and the other name the Greeks gave it was Syros, meaning scorcher. Searing, I think, is a related term. It was thought to be a precursor to a period of bad weather, collective madness, and catastrophe, which, when you look at the wildfires in Europe right now, does kind of make you wonder.
Yes, it does feel relevant. So I'm guessing it wasn't just the Greeks that believed this.
No, not by any means. So the ancient Egyptians saw Sirius's arrival as the precursor of the annual Nile floods. Similar mythology about bad luck and madness exists in Middle Eastern, Indian, and Far Eastern cultures. And throughout Europe, during the Middle Ages, when humorism was the primary force of medicine, it was believed that bloodletting during the dog days was extremely bad for you.
Well, that's probably right. I mean, I think that bloodletting in general is a bad idea, especially my blood. But what do we do about this dog days problem, if not bleed one another dry?
Well, there's actually not much we can do, really. We're just sort of meant to wait them out.
Oh, great. That's useful. And I believe Mercury is going to be in retrograde this month as well. So we are in for a party. And when do the dog days finish?
Well, this year they started on Monday the 3rd of July and they will end this Friday the 11th of August.
Oh, that's all right then. So that means anything bad that happened in that whole period we can absolutely blame on otherwise unrelated occurrences in deep space.
Yep. Although from Friday, of course, we're once again going to have to take responsibility for everything all over again, and that's a bit of a drag.
At least we can blame Mercury. And I think we could also get all of our madness and bad luck out of the way this week.
Oh, that sounds great. Now, speaking of madness and bad luck, shall we give the county criers a good prod and have them ring us into Cambridgeshire?
Definitely. Now listen up, you. Dog days are associated with lethargy and madness, but if you all don't get up and take your underpants off your heads right this minute, I'm going to come over there and let some blood, no matter what Hippocrates says.
Oh, yay! Oh, yay! Gather round! Oh, yay! Gather round! Oh, yay!
Cambridgeshire is located in the east of England and is bordered by Lincolnshire to the north, Norfolk to the northeast, Suffolk to the east, Essex and Hertfordshire to the south, and Bedfordshire and Northamptonshire to the west.
So another landlocked one.
Absolutely. As always, there's a map showing its precise location on the blog at threeravenspodcast.com/blog, but Eleanor, do you remember an episode or two ago when we talked about Northamptonshire being the source of the River Nene?
Yes.
Well, the Nene runs through Cambridgeshire. In fact, to get some early folklore in, there is a legendary mere called Whittlesea, which used to stretch for 3,000 acres as fed by the Nene. It was drained several times from the 17th century onwards, but kept flooding, and it's said hurricanes used to rise up out of the mere.
I'm not sure what the science of that is,
No,
but
neither
it
am I.
sounds very dramatic.
Yeah, now, Whittlesea last flooded itself in 1862, and since then the area has been farmland, but it wasn't until this last massive effort to finally drain Whittlesea that the engineers found an ancient sword, an ancient silver thurible, so an incense burner basically, an incense boat, and several other artefacts, including a silver ram's head. Now, some of the items have subsequently gone missing, but the thurible and incense boat are now on display at the British Museum.
Wow.
Cool, isn't it?
That, yeah, let's go and see them.
Yeah, that's... Now, one of the things Cambridgeshire is most famous for is the fens, which are these massive expanses of low-lying marshland that dominated the northeast of the county for the longest time. Holme Fen is actually the lowest point in England, standing at 9 feet below sea level. And really interestingly, Flag Fen near Peterborough is a Bronze Age site, very famous. People theorise it was a religious site dating from approximately 3,500 years ago.
Wow. I knew about Peterborough Cathedral, but Flag Fen sounds amazing.
Yeah, it is. Now, people might have seen pictures of this, and again, I'll pop some on the blog, but in 1982, archaeologists found an ancient wooden causeway there, made up of over 60,000 timbers, arranged in 5 mysterious but highly accurate regimented rows. None of the wood used is from the area, making it a bit like Stonehenge, where, of course, the stone was brought from the Preseli Mountains in Wales. But again, Flag Fen, loads of artefacts were found submerged under the water and peat bogs, including ancient boats, broken and bent daggers, jewellery, all sorts of stuff, leading some archaeologists to call the marshes of Flag Fen the Land of the Dead.
Land of the Dead?
Yep. One of the coolest parts of it is called Must Farm, where there's this quarry that's close to Whittlesea, where they found Bronze Age dwellings in an incredible state of preservation, leading to Must Farm being known as Britain's Pompeii.
Wow. So, leaving the elephant in the room just stood there for a minute.
Yeah.
I've been reading quite a lot about Mary I at the moment.
Yes.
And so I really feel like we need to give Peterborough a special shout out.
Okay, so Peterborough is this bizarrely under-discussed place in England today, probably because Cambridge itself steals so much of the limelight, but holy moly, Peterborough Cathedral is insane.
Oh, it's wild. I mean, I love it because it's a resting place of both Catherine of Aragon and Mary, Queen of Scots.
Yeah.
So for that alone, it's a bit of a mecca. But the look of the cathedral is completely unique.
You are so right. There is literally no other cathedral in the world that's like it, in fact. It's built in the early English Gothic style with 3 enormous arches in its front facade. It used to be an Anglo-Saxon church called the Meadhamstead, and you can still see the Dark Age header stone there. Oh, it's a stunner.
Oh, as is Ely Cathedral, actually.
Yes, so between Ely Cathedral, Peterborough Cathedral and Durham Cathedral, you have this kind of insane trinity of 12th century architecture, with Ely, which is also, as you say, unbelievably beautiful, of course, being on the site of a 7th century abbey on an island named literally because the area was famous for people catching eels.
I mean, don't like eels, but love that it's named after them.
I mean, technically, Ely Cathedral is actually called the Cathedral Church of the Holy and Undivided Trinity.
Yeah, right. There's eels there. It's totally an Ely Cathedral.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, all this makes me wonder if Cambridgeshire has similar legends to County Durham, which we did in episode 4,
Yes.
with these sort of eel-like worms hatching from the fen waters.
And like Cumberland too. And yes, you'll be happy to hear it does.
Happy is the wrong word.
So Wormwood Hill,
Oh, no.
near Stapleford in Cambridgeshire, was supposedly a site where worms used to breed and hide in the woods.
I don't like them when they're breeding and hiding in the woods.
There's also, quite funnily, a secessionary organisation in the region called the Acting Witan of Mercia, who want the region to become independent from the rest of the country. And their symbol is a white worm.
Madness. Well, I mean, I totally support them. I think that's great. So does Cambridgeshire, the Witan aside, have a county motto?
Yes. Corde uno sapientes simus. With one heart, let us be men of understanding.
That's very strong,
Yeah.
but I feel like is alluding to the elephant in the room once more.
Okay, well, Cambridgeshire used to be known as Grantbridgeshire because of the other river that flows through the county, the Granter. Grantbridgeshire is what it was called in the Domesday Book, but over time, people more often started calling it Cambridgeshire after the River Cam, another important river there. And this tradition was supercharged by that elephant. The other big thing the county is famous for, the University of Cambridge.
Oh, I was talking about Oliver Cromwell. He was born in Cambridge.
Yeah, he was. And it's actually said that the ghost of Oliver Cromwell is one of the many spooks and spectres you can see in the town, where there is supposedly a rather good ghost tour run by the local ghost club.
Okay, holiday being booked now. Actually, I have visited Oliver Cromwell's house in Ely.
Well, that doesn't surprise me
Which
at all.
is a really great museum house. It's lovely, actually.
Is it?
And that's supposedly extremely haunted, not by Cromwell himself, but by other
Creeps
ghosts.
and spooks and
But I did
spectres.
see the cradle he was supposedly rocked in as a baby, which they've got there.
And did the cradle itself suggest Republican sentiment?
Not particularly, but presumably there must have been something in it as tiny Ollie lay there screeching.
Or did it have little bars down the side that he wanted to escape from? You cannot contain me!
Yes.
Now, Cambridge, of course, is the county town of Cambridgeshire, but it wasn't always a grand seat of learning, or that grand at all, really. After the Romans left, the Venerable Bede described Cambridge as a little ruined city in his great History of the English People.
Why is that?
Well, I guess because it was simply ruined. Like, it was a small Roman settlement and fort, and then there was nothing there afterwards. Now, there is still the motte of the Motte and Bailey Castle, erected in Cambridge by William the Conqueror in 1068, but the town was only granted a town charter by Henry III in the 1120s, around which time the Church of the Holy Sepulchre was built there. That's better known in England as the Round Church. If you don't know the Round Church, it's an amazing building.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
And then it wasn't until 1209 that a bunch of students from Oxford University, fleeing persecution, founded Cambridge University. And, as I imagine everybody knows, Cambridge has since gone on to become one of the finest universities in the world. Perhaps the defining building of the university is King's College Chapel. The building of the chapel was begun in 1446 by Henry VI, but only completed, interestingly, by Henry VIII in 1536.
Oh, he did something good.
He did do something good.
Oh, we'll allow it.
Okay.
Just once.
It
Don't
can
get
pass
used to
through
it, Henry.
Now, what delayed the building of the King's College Chapel was basically the War of the Roses. And if you've never seen it, my goodness, it is a breathtaking place.
Oh, it is. And even if you're not religious, it's well worth watching at Christmas the annual carol service from King's College,
Yeah.
which is always just beautiful.
It is.
Fantastic music.
It's
and
gorgeous.
readings, and the atmosphere is just so lovely.
It's lovely, isn't it? Yeah. Now, the history of Cambridge University is its whole other topic. Like, books have been written about that are readily available elsewhere. But the fenlands and waterways around the town are part of the reason why, to this day, you can travel about the town in little boats known as punts. These are little barges, a little bit like gondolas in Venice, and Cambridge alumni include a dizzying number of very famous people, from royalty to the likes of my favourite poet, Lord Byron, the economist John Maynard Keynes, Alan Turing, Stephen Hawking, Isaac Newton, Robert Oppenheimer. I mean, the list goes on.
There was a scene, wasn't there, in the new film about Robert Oppenheimer at Cambridge University?
Yeah, there was, yeah.
So, what about the folklore?
Okay, well, let's start gently with a little devil tale.
Excellent, love a devil tale.
Okay, so this one pertains to the stone market cross in the town of March. This stone dates from the 16th century, when it's said that the people of the town wanted to build a new church there to replace the medieval church of St. Wendrada. Now, just a note on the church of St. Wendrada. Have you ever visited this place?
I don't think so, but there are. It's a bit like Norwich. There are a lot of churches in Cambridge, aren't there?
Well, so the church of St. Wendrada is an amazing building. I'll put some photos, again, on the blog, but like Blythburgh Church of the Black Shuck legend, St. Wendrada's has this incredible double hammer beam angel roof, which bears over 120 angels carved during the medieval era, alongside 19 carved saints, so it's very pretty. But still, the people of the March wanted something befitting the new Protestant era, only, as with a rash of our recent episodes, whenever they tried to start building the church, not a ghost pig or anything less than the devil himself appeared to pull down the stones.
Oh dear.
Yeah. So it's said, therefore, that the people of the town erected this huge stone cross to drive the devil away, which was successful, but after that they decided they kind of couldn't be bothered to build the church, and they just kind of carried on using St. Wendrada's instead.
Well, we know from the legend of St. Botolph in Suffolk that great stone crosses are very effective in driving out demons and devils of all kinds.
Definitely. And one of the things that's quite interesting about St. Wendrada's is it looks like the same company of family business, actually, that carved the angels for that church also carved those that appear in Blythburgh.
Really?
Yeah.
That is so amazing.
It's pretty cool,
I
isn't
love
it?
those carved angels.
Yeah, me
beautiful.
too. Some gorgeous churches in that whole region.
So amazing when you see the ones that have the little bits of paint left, and you can imagine the bright colours that they would have been.
We're very lucky that they escaped all of the kind of Reformation. And
a bit too far for Ollie and his mates to ride out and smash out.
Yeah, indeed.
Unfortunately.
Now, March, the town that I was talking about, as you might guess, is situated on the edge of the Cambridgeshire marshlands, and these marshes around Cambridgeshire are home to some pretty cool folklore, not least the Lantern Men.
Whoa.
Now, in the modern day, the best place to see the Lantern Men is meant to be Wicken Fen, which is a 2,000-acre nature reserve looked after by the National Trust. It's home to over 9,000 species, and globally famous Cambridge graduate and father of evolutionary theory, Charles Darwin, collected beetles there in the 1820s. It's really pretty, but the Lantern Men, perhaps not so nice.
What do they get up to?
Well, it's said that these shadowy shapes are either forms of ghost light or evil spirits, but either way, they look to drown people in the fens. And in quite a sinister turn, because of course there are will-o'-the-wisp legends all over England, legends say that if you wander the fens at night, then not only will you see the Lantern Men, but these tall, dark shapes carrying flaming lanterns whistle to one another to communicate.
Ooh.
I know, it's creepy, isn't it?
Whistling, floating across the fence.
Yeah, people aren't sure if the whistling is the Lantern Men hunting or just the creatures talking to one another, but it's said that if you encounter them, then the best advice is to lie down flat on your front with your lips touching the ground, being sure not to look up until the sound of them has passed off.
Sounds very wise.
I know,
Get down
right?
when you see the Lantern Men.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that story. It's quite inspiring.
It is, and creepy as all hell. Now, another interesting folkloric tradition from Cambridgeshire is that of toad men.
I feel like we might have come across the Toad Man before.
Well, we kind of talked a little bit about them, didn't we, in an early episode, probably down in the southwest. Now, sadly, these are not giant half-men, half-toad hybrids.
Kind of a shame.
Bit of a shame, yeah. No, but still, toadmen are kind of witches, but their powers are specifically linked to controlling horses. The idea is that a person does a deal with the devil. To get the party started, you need to catch a male toad. If it's female, for whatever reason, no dice. Then you need to either impale that toad on a thorn bush or stake it to an anthill and wait until the toad's bones have been picked clean. Then, at midnight on a full moon, you need to toss the bones into a running stream, at which time it's said that all but one specific fork-shaped bone will be washed away. If you then recover that bone and carry it with you, probably in a bag around your belt, then the devil will give you psychic control over horses.
So it's a bit of work at the start, but a lifetime investment.
I know, right?
In psychic control over horses.
I mean, part of what I thought about when I was reading about this is, like, horses aren't maybe that useful nowadays.
No, but I think if you had control over them, that could still come in handy in a variety of situations.
Yeah, definitely. Although they can't hold things with their hooves, you know? They don't have the opposable thumbs.
But they can carry things on their backs.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. And one of the curious things about the toadmen, actually, is that there were reported cases of them during the 20th century,
Really?
including a rash of them in the interwar years between 1918 and 1938.
We come across quite a lot of this, don't we?
Yep.
I think a lot of people might think that folk magic had really died out by the 20th century, but that is so not true.
Definitely not
There are so
the
many
case.
reports of it still being used.
Now, interestingly, talking about that interwar period, this was also the time when a legendary cryptid from Cambridgeshire was seen quite a few times, and this is the shug monkey.
The shug monkey.
Well, some people say it's a ghost, some people say it's a demon, but ultimately the shug monkey legend seems broadly related to similar black shuck-like demon dogtails. Now, it's said Black Shuck himself roamed as far as Cambridgeshire.
Long legs.
But, yeah, quite. This particular creature, the shug monkey, primarily stalked the area around the village of West Ratting. That's Ratting with a W. Now, people said that it was like a sheepdog in shape, although with jet black fur and a terrifying monkey's face with staring eyes.
This makes me wonder when this was.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you see medieval drawings of animals, don't you? Where you
Yes.
think, okay, the artist has heard about this animal,
Yes.
but never actually seen one.
Well, one curious sighting dates from the 1950s, and the person who saw it said, and I quote, that the beast was like a bear in size, up to 10 feet in length. So how'd you fancy that? A 10-foot demon dog with a monkey's face.
I do not fancy that.
Well, going back a lot further, in addition to legendary outlaw Hereward the Wake, who's the subject of my story today, Cambridgeshire is also home to another folkloric hero. This one's called Tom Hickathrift. Have you ever heard of Tom Hickathrift?
No.
Okay, well, this is a really, really old story, dating from before the times of the Norman invasion. But basically, the story goes that a local labourer, Tom Hickathrift, was an enormous, brawny chap, but very much a human being. And though versions of the story vary, Tom is said to have battled with a giant either near the Isle of Ely or the town of Wisbech, where a giant was said to have roved. Either way, Tom is said to have used a cartwheel attached to its axle tree and then battled the giant with it, after which the victorious Tom was either given the governorship of the Isle of Thanet, which feels a bit random.
As it's in Kent.
Yes, or the giant's lands, which were all around Wisbech.
A cartwheel
I know.
is a very interesting weapon.
I know, it is, isn't it? And one really interesting side note to this is in Tilney, in Norfolk, there was once a large tomb that has now fallen to pieces, dedicated to a man named Hickathrift, rather than Hickathrift, with a stone monument on it which once showed an axle tree and a cartwheel. So that's pretty cool. And to this day, the large stone cross in the churchyard now is known as Hickathrift's candlestick.
Lovely.
I know. And in Cambridgeshire, there's a whole load of places named after him to this day, including Hickathrift Farm, Hickathrift House, Hickathrift Corner, and a kind of valley in the county, which was once known as Hickathrift's Basin, though that has subsequently been turned into a housing estate.
So that you can live in Hickathrift's Basin.
Yeah, you can. Now, some people actually think that the shape, the axle tree and the cartwheel is related to Thor's hammer, and it's a kind of Thor-adjacent legend.
Yeah, and of course the cross as well.
Yeah,
It all ties in together, doesn't it?
It's pretty
Very
interesting. Now, the landscape of Cambridgeshire actually is pretty threaded through with folklore, such as the Gog Magog Hills.
What?
Yes. Now, if you've listened to our Middlesex episode, then you'll know, because Eleanor told us all about the ancient English myth of Britain's founding by Brutus of Troy, who battled the giant Gog Magog.
I didn't know there were Gog Magog Hills, though.
Right. Well, it was thought for a very long time that New Troy was founded in the Gog Magog Hills in Cambridgeshire.
Okay.
For a long time, students were banned from going there because it was seen as a kind of sacred monument, which I think is kind of amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Now,
I mean, we know that Brutus did wander around for quite a long time before finally settling on London. We know this for fact.
Yes,
because
absolutely
Brutus of Troy is an absolute fact. It certainly is on this podcast.
And Geoffrey of Monmouth only tells the truth.
Only speaks the truth.
Yeah, that's right. But really curiously, excavations in those hills, including at Wandlebury Ring, have found loads of evidence of Bronze Age forts and settlements. So, you know, who's to say?
If not Brutus, then somebody else.
Of all of the landscape of Cambridgeshire, though, for me, perhaps the most evocative part is the Isle of Ely, which is where today's tale is largely set. And I'll start spinning my yarn right after this. Listen to that rain. You know, there was once an Englishman who could hide inside the rainfall. I met him in Flanders, fighting in Skaldimariland. A mercenary, he was paid in gold by Robert the Frisian, and that is where we became friends. Even then, he was a legend. His mother, the naked horse rider, Godiva, was known in all towns, all cities. His father, Leofric of Mercia, Elderman of the Wicca, was a Northman like me. But his son, Hereward, was not like Leofric, Hammer of Harthacanute, obedient against Godwin of Wessex. He was not like Godiva, the holy wife. He was a moon son, blessed by the Vanir, with blood like boiling rage. Hereward was a younger son. His brother, Alfgeir, was his father's golden son. Hereward was not a son of gold or silver. He was a son of iron. A child of rage, always fighting, always hiding. Hereward was banished in his 18th winter to the outer kingdoms of England. It was then in Fife, fighting for Domnall Mac Doncarda, when he was duelled with a bear, mighty and fierce in unarmed combat. Hereward, bear strong, emerged victor. It was then in Cornwall when he stole the Princess Torfida from the castle of Condor. Later, when a tournament fighter in Cambrai, he married Torfida but fathered no sons. His life, bathed in blood, saw Torfida flee from him. She took to a convent where she gave herself to God instead. Heartbroken, Hereward went to war for Robert the Frisian. There, I, Morton Lightfoot, became sword brother to Hereward. By night, we walked long shadows, danced with our blades, and hid in the woods like owls. We were like the goat's eyes, seeing, plotting, fading to the trees like the waves into the sea. It was then Hereward learned of the death of Elfgar. William the Bastard had invaded England. His men had murdered Elfgar, heir to the lands of Leofric, and placed his head onto a pike in front of his own castle keep. With our blood-stained gold gifted on the death of Baldwin of Flanders, Hereward and I sailed for England. There we found the new lords feasting in the halls of Leofric, feasting in the halls of Alfgar. We passed through the gates like the night storm. 15 Norman knights were in the banqueting hall, laughing, eating, mocking the name of Godiva as a whore. All fell beneath our blades, and from that place of slaughter, riding stolen horses, we went from house to house and raised the allies of the House of Mercia. Our men, our brothers, fled with us to Meadhamstead, and there, above the ancient Hedda stone laid by King Paida, son of Penda, Hereward was knighted by the Abbot Brand, his uncle, and so he was declared protector of those lands. In those times, the men of William the Bastard rode through Mercia, carving the land into new countries. With such numbers, we could not fight head to head, so we fled back to Flanders. But the reach of the Bastard was long. First, his ally, William de Warenne, sent his brother Frederick to kill Hereward. He came to us with an army, but Hereward outwitted him and sent Frederick's body back to de Warenne as an offering of peace. So it was that William de Warenne came himself, challenging Hereward to battle. On horseback, William de Warenne rode to Hereward, who, on foot, took down his bow and notched an arrow and slew de Warenne with a single shot. For strength, Hereward travelled to Soderup and to the mead hall of Svein Estridsson, king of the Danes. I think you never met him. He had so many sons. But I knew him well, old enemy of Harald Godwin's son and wily grandson of Sweyn Forkbeard. Estridsson was no ally of William the Bastard. From the port of Abendra, we sailed north for the holy Isle of Ely in the Mercian kingdom of the Gairas. Here, the holy treasures of the monks were taken by Estridsson to Denmark for safekeeping, and the campaign of Hereward began. The Abbot Brand at Meadhamstead, uncle to Hereward, had been killed by William's men. In place of the ancient church, the Norman men had built a new abbey, Peterborough, and put in Brand's place a new archbishop. His blood was spilled by Hereward in that place of stone, the cathedral sacked, and all the treasure gifted to Estridsson for his protection. These days were days of slaughter and war, but the rising pillars of smoke were as a signal fire, calling allies to our banner. One such ally, Morcar, cousin of Hereward and ousted Earl of Northumbria, escaped from London and joined with us. Then, from the Isle of Ely, deep in the fenlands, we sheltered with the Bishop Athelwine and planned the battles to come. In one long winter, William the Bastard sent to us two foes who were much afeared. The first, Belsar, the great siege planner, came with masons, woodcutters, and chests of gold. The second, the witch Sikalgaita, spinner of whispers, came with servants of the dark. Together, Belsar and Sicalgaita surrounded our holy isle, lighting night fires and sending blackest, whistling terrors sliding through the still waters of the bogs. We could not hide from these dark powers, and so Hereward and I slipped from Ely and battled the demons in the dark. Creatures without blood or bone, our blades cut through them as scythes through summer wheat, their forms falling into the fen waters as clay. Hundreds such demons we slew, hunting always for Sicalgaita, whose craft was as sharp as ice. But Hereward, the watcher in the dark, had blood on his teeth. He would never surrender, and like snow melting in winter, he found out Sicalgaita hiding in a tower in the marsh. Here he burned her, and her demons and her night whispers could not save her then. Alas for Morcar, who was weak. Belsar from his fortress tempted Morcar with gold. First, Belsar bribed the monks of Ely to show him the way to the island. The Normans built a causeway from timber a mile long, but the knights, in their armor, riding their horses, sank the ramp into the waters there, and the invasion failed. But Morcar went to Belsar seeking peace. Instead, Morcar was imprisoned. And so Hereward and I fled from the Holy Isle, never to return. For years we hid amongst the bulrushes there, living in the stink of the mire. But Hereward was never one to face battle head on. We were raiders, our allies in the towns and villages, knowing Hereward in disguise. Dressed as a potter, selling wares, he came to them with word of his resistances. They made gifts to him of food and blades and fresh arrows, knowing he would fight for them until his dying day. Yet William would never give up. No longer William the Bastard. He then became William Conqueror, King of England. Outer Mercia was no more, replaced by new shires, Bedford, Huntingdon, Northampton, Cambridge. And to these lands the Conqueror sent a giant, Ogor the Breton. For it was known in these days that Hereward was once again in love. Alftruda, widow of Gospatrick, was beloved of Hereward, and the two made to have a wedding day at the Abbey of Thornay on the Fenland's edge. Only on that day, when Hereward and Alftruda were joined by God, Ogor the Breton arrived with an army marched from Crowland to the north. And so, instead of a bear, Hereward duelled with Ogre beneath the summer sun. And as they fought, the clouds covering the sky, rain began to fall and lightning forked above them, for the Vanir were watching. Steel clashed steel, and the earth moved below them. But Hereward was older now, with silver in his beard, and the marshland waters in his bones. Ogor the Breton defeated Hereward, and the hero of the marshes was bound in chains. His bones were broken, one eye was lost, and Alftruda, the new bride, was imprisoned with her husband, and the march to London begun. But Ogor, for all his might, had little wisdom. He took Hereward and Alftruda south to the edge of the marshes, and that is where we found them out. The battle was one of ugliness. Ogor slew many of our men, and though we struck back with twice the fury, their numbers were too great. Yet
I did not fight that day. Instead, as the rain fell, I stepped through the drops and loosed the chains on Hereward's broken form. So the hero made one last escape, he and Alftruda vanishing for a final time. His forces decimated, the resistance was over, the conqueror had won. It is said Hereward and Alftruda took shelter in the court of Domnall Mac Donchada, his old ally. I will never know, and if I did, I would never tell. For I, Morton Lightfoot, have come home. As you know, Harold Whetstone, iron cannot contain me. Stone cannot stop me. Wood is my friend. The knife I have at your throat is an old blade, but it is sharp. And so, I am sorry to disturb you in your sleep and to come here in the dead of night, but I seek the treasure your father took into his safe keeping. The relics of Ely and of the Meadsham Steed are no doubt in your treasure vault even now. What a shame for such brightness to be gathering dust. Perhaps then you and I can take a walk to see them. If you don't scream, it will be simpler. We both know there are many more brothers to replace you on the throne. And if all goes well, you may yet rule a long time while those relics and I will vanish from here, like owls into the night.
So, Eleanor, Hereward the Wake, what do you think?
Well, I loved your telling of the story. Literally, the character had a knife at someone's throat. That's very dramatic.
Well, thank you.
Great accent, too.
Oh, I took a big swing on the accent.
No, Bill, I was just thinking, I've been trying to learn some Old English at the moment, and honestly, it's very bad. And I can probably exchange a few polite words in a mead hall.
Yes.
But I feel there is quite a lot of similarities in the pronunciation of Old English.
Well, thank you.
With the accent.
I did spend quite a long time practicing and listening to Scandinavian accents and estimations of what Old English sounded like. So hopefully it was okay.
Yeah, it was a great combination of the two. So, I've got to ask.
Yeah.
Why is he called Hereward the Wake? Because when I was seeing that, I was sort of thinking, is he a modern and socially conscious individual? But that, of course, would be Hereward the Woke.
Yes. Okay, bad joke, but I appreciate it. So he was called Hereward Wakenan, which means Hereward the Watcher. So his whole thing was he hid and watched and then plotted like an outlaw.
I see. So Wake or Wacker is literally Watcher.
Yeah, that's it. Literally,
fantastic.
Watcher. And he definitely existed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, exactly what he did is a bit less clear. For example, we have the 1071 Peterborough version of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, known as the E-Text, and he was still alive and a rebel at that point in time. Then he's in the Doomsday Book, plus he's in the Liber Eliensis, aka the Book of Ely, and, by far the most detailed, the Gesta Herewardi, which is basically just all about Hereward. That one dates from the 13th century, so long after he's died, meaning his legend has built up all of this kind of extra detail, and all of them contradict one another, so it's a bit of a free-for-all.
Did Geoffrey get his hands on Hereward?
I don't think Geoffrey of Monmouth actually wrote at all about Hereward.
Amazing. It seems right up his street.
It does, doesn't it? Now, one thing is for sure is that Hereward definitely took part in the insurrection on the Isle of Ely, and his popularity as a folk hero really kicked up into high gear in the 1860s when a novel by Charles Kingsley came out about him, and that's very much inspired by Ivanhoe, and after that Hereward kind of became a national hero in England, feeding into the whole Victorian folk revival we've mentioned quite a few times.
The story seems rather gorier than Ivanhoe.
It does a little bit, but it's also thought that Hereward's real-life escapades in the Fens inspired the tale. of Robin Hood.
Yes, you can definitely see the similarity, can't you? Hiding out with his band of outlaws in nature and springing out at people.
Definitely. And as we've covered in episodes from Nottinghamshire to Cumberland, lots of parts of England do claim to have their own kind of Robin Hood adjacent tales.
Yes, it's good to have a local hero, isn't it? Any sign of Hereward robbing the rich to pay the poor?
I don't think so. It's just like, well, unless you count the Normans as the rich, because the whole thing was they came in, kicked out, killed and eliminated all of the old Anglo-Saxon kings and families, apart from those ones that kind of pledged fealty to them. And even then, they were often imprisoned and kept at courts while the new Norman barons, lords and nobles took over their old territory. So it was a real sea change and kind of, I think, symbolic of this moment where the Norman yoke, as it's known, was put over the English people.
So Hereward was sort of riding around liberating people.
And one of the things that I find so interesting about this whole story is there are records of all of the ancient gold and silver from the various different cathedrals, including Peterborough, or the Meadhamstead as it was known, and Ely, being given to this Danish king, Estridsson, and then nobody knows where they went.
Might explain a lot of the hoards that are regularly discovered in Fenland, Bogland, and just in the ground.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Around England. Yeah, very cool.
All right, shall we move on to correspondence?
Yes, let's.
Okay, well, the first thing to say is that we've had a new review.
Oh, that's good. Breaks our review drought. It's been almost a month, I think.
Yep, I blame it on the dog star. Anyway, this one is from Lady Morwenlin on Apple Podcasts. She wrote, Three Ravens podcast is outstandingly entertaining. This is such an informative and interesting podcast. I love listening to the folklore and history of the different counties of England.
Yay, thank you, Lady Morwenlin. And please, if you have 5 minutes, do hop onto Apple Podcasts or iTunes and write us one too.
Please.
We know we say it every week and we know it's a little bit boring.
Yes.
But we also know that about 1,000 people are downloading each episode, meaning if just half of you wrote us a little review, the difference it would make to us would be mind-boggling.
It really, really would. Elsewhere, we've had some lovely messages from lovely people, including Harold, who was in touch quite fortuitously via Facebook. He wrote, Hi, thank you for producing a fantastic podcast. In your episode on witch bottles, you mentioned bent needles and how this ritually killed the needle, allowing it to function on the other side. There are archaeological finds of bent swords in Europe. These were likely destroyed for the same reason. Relevant to England, I believe Flag Fen has yielded some interesting finds.
Flag Fen.
Yep.
Oh, thank you, Harold, for pointing us in the direction of Flag Fen.
I know.
Which is very fascinating.
And yet, loads of bent swords and bent daggers in Flag Fen, and you do wonder if it's because they then become useful in the afterlife.
Or not, because they're dead.
Well, that's also true.
Now, our Patreon supporter Alexandra also messaged to say, ridiculously pleased to hear my name read out with King of Patreon. There goes that childlike spirit again. King Alexandra, we're here for it.
Yeah.
And she also said, I wanted to let you know that Worcestershire sauce, which my old boyfriend called What's This Here sauce, love that, also comes in a vegan version without the anchovies, and it's quite good. Thank goodness for that.
Lovely, excellent, good. We are going to get some. Now, on Threads, which we've now also started using, we also heard from Daniel, who's a cave and mine explorer.
Oh, how interesting.
He messaged us about the Drakelow tunnels you mentioned during our Worcestershire episode.
Yes, in case you need a reminder, the Drakelow tunnels were dug during World War II and run for almost 3,000 square feet. And after the military decommissioned them in the 1990s, they've been a hotbed of paranormal activity, including hauntings by ghosts of construction workers who died during collapses in the building of the tunnels. And of course, there's the demon that was allegedly loose during a satanic ritual.
Oh, God. Anyway, so Daniel messaged to say, I went on the tour earlier this year.
Oh, he survived.
Well worth it. But they're very strict about not allowing photos on the tour. I'll send you a copy of my notes. It's also near the rock houses of Kinver Edge, so you can make quite a subterranean day out in the area.
Sounds perfect.
Yeah, it
it's
does.
a little bit spooky. I'll get my head torch ready.
Okay, excellent.
We also heard from some people who voted for us in the British Podcast Awards, including Mary, Stuart and Bella, who messaged us too to say, hey, just to say that I love your podcast and have voted for you in the British Podcast Awards. Hope you win. Best of luck.
Oh, God, it'll be amazing to win. Please vote for us in the show notes. There's a link. Thank you so much to Mary, Stuart and Bella for your votes. We should also say a huge thank you to our likers, commenters and super sharers this week, including Sarah, Nigel, Anne, Gary, Donna and Robert on Facebook, Lady Liminal, Janari Ann Boa, Pagan Babe 1666 and Elena of the Ways on Instagram and Threads, and the Haunted series, Paco B. Garcia and June Brazier on Twitter, or X maybe. I have no idea what Elon Musk is doing.
I was actually reading an article about the sort of symbolism of the X.
Oh, yeah.
And the writer had linked it to the symbology of Thor's hammer,
Oh,
among
had he?
other things. And of course, the X is a kiss, and it's a cross. And so I'm interested to see how the whole X thing develops from a symbology perspective.
Well, at the moment, it seems like fewer and fewer people are using it, so it might be X marks the spot at the grave of a social media titan. Yeah.
Anyway, thank you to everyone who is gronking about Three Ravens on social media,
Yes, thank
whether
you.
on X or not. Please do the same and tell your friends about what we're up to via facebook.com/Three Ravens Podcast, Instagram and, of course, Threads via @Three Ravens Podcast, and Twitter or X via @Three Ravens Pod.
So then, Eleanor, where are we off to next week?
We are headed off to Westmoreland for a tale of witchcraft and wildness.
That sounds
But
exciting.
before then, we have our second Magic and Medicines bonus episode on Thursday, which is all about love potions.
Ooh, well, that sounds promising. And, of course, we also have our Patreon exclusive episode about the extremely haunted Screaming Woods at Pluckley to shiver your timbers, also coming out on Thursday.
Yes, and if you'd like exclusive content, including Patreon-only episodes, all of our episodes ad-free, our stories as text versions, and the Three Ravens newsletter, then do please sign up for either $3 a month or $6 a month at patreon.com/Three Ravens Podcast.
Ooh, and don't forget about the Three Ravens Film Club. Let's all watch You Won't Be Alone and get properly freaked out.
I'm so excited!
In the meantime, while our story's gone that way, we'll go this way.
And remember, don't whistle till you're out of the woods.
Thanks and credit go to Michael Swanton, Stephen Knight and Thomas H. Olgren for their book Robin Hood and Other Outlaw Tales, Charles Kingsley for his book Hereward, The Last of the English, and Christine Miller from SpookyIsles.com.
Our theme song is the traditional folk ballad Three Ravens, performed by Eleanor Conlon and Ben Harbour, and our logo was designed by Ollie James Dare.
The Three Ravens podcast is a Rust and Stardust production, written and produced by me, Martin Vaughs. Thanks for listening.
God sent every gentleman, such hounds, such hawks, and such leman, with a down, derry, derry, derry.